Thank you, Emily. Can you see me and hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. All right, now I'm back, this time as a homeowner. I'm taking off my city hat and I'm coming to you out as a homeowner. I just want to share my personal story of how I electrified my home with these two major appliances. And for this story, I'll go back to just 2019, when I asked myself the question on the screen: must we burn fossil fuels in our homes? Because actually by 2019, I had already gotten an electric vehicle and I'd put solar panels on my roof. And I thought that was pretty much about as much as I could do. I didn't think about my gas appliances in my house because I thought it'd be very expensive, difficult, time consuming to change those out. But the more that I educated myself about all electric buildings by attending workshops like this and reading up on the literature, I realized that I was wrong. And so let me just jump in here and tell you a little bit more about my home situation. This is me. I live in the suburbs out in Lafayette. And when you come in my house, I ask myself the question: where does our home burn fossil fuels? And we've seen this picture. So we're going to just talk about the gas furnace and the gas hot water heater today. And so as I decided to just challenge myself and see, it sounds like these things are good. Everybody says that heat pumps are good, but let me figure out how much they cost and what are the benefits going to be. And I thought that the process was going to be, well, let me start the project and get some cost quotes, and then I could begin the retrofit. But actually, it was a bit hard to find the right contractor to do this, as has been mentioned earlier today. Many of the plumbers or HVAC vendors out there were trying to talk me into keeping to going with keeping gas. And they said heat pumps are expensive, don't use them, not much is known. And so I had to keep going through contractors to find the one that actually was willing to do the work for me. But when I found the very few that were available to do it, they actually didn't give me a cost quote yet. And one of them, who I like very much, he suggested that I do an energy audit first. And actually, I was thinking, he's just trying to upsell me on some extra service that I don't need. But when he explained to me that, he needed to do this energy audit of my home in order to properly size the equipment so that he could then give me the cost quote, I said, okay, well, that actually does make sense. So I actually agreed to this energy audit as a first measure before he could give me the quote. So that audit was $550 in the case of this contractor, and they credited it to an actual purchase if I made it. And so one of the steps they did, they came into the house to see whether there was energy leakage happening. And here's an example of my library where, using a thermal camera up on the right, you can see that the dark color shows cold air leaking into my house in the winter. And so I was basically, it was an example of showing how the insulation and gaps in this home was only 15 years old. So it's a pretty new home. And so that was showing how I was losing energy in my building envelope. So they suggested doing something called gap sealing, which saves energy and improves the air quality. And you could see an air gap on the left from a pipe going through. On the right, you could see what they do to foam seal it. And this keeps your warm air in and also keeps the dirty attic air out of your house and all that good stuff. But this is a chart that actually shows the heating and cooling loads of my house before on the left and after the gap sealing and insulation on the right. And so by doing insulation and energy efficiency measurements in my house, I could actually reduce the amount of load or energy that would be needed to comfortably cool and heat my house by 44%. And so what that really means that when you reduce the load that your house requires for HVAC, you would then require smaller and cheaper HVAC equipment, which actually runs more, uses less electricity over time as well. So here's what they did. They went up in the attic, and you can see my original pink fiberglass there. They took all of that out so that they vacuumed it all out so they could see the gaps. Then they filled the gaps with that sealant, as you can see on the right. And then they refilled it all up with new blown-in cellulosic insulation. Now, this was the real surprise on my journey towards electrification, because the first step was energy audit and insulation and gap sealing. That didn't feel like an electrification project, but that was the first step. And the benefits of doing it, as you recall, before, And the after, when they came back to use the thermal gun on it, you could see how much more airtight and less leakiness I had after the improved insulation. And I could definitely feel during the heat waves how our home is much more comfortable and resistant to those heat waves. So amazingly, that my whole project to do all 4 of these appliances actually was completed in just 45 days. So something that I thought was going to take forever and be really complicated, actually the technologies are all there. The contractors are not really out there, but they did, the ones that I did find did it pretty quickly. So here's a picture of how it looked for the heat pump ductless mini split version. On the outside, I have 2 mini splits installed, and inside they connect to 8 of these air handling units. We have the wall mounted air handling units in our bedrooms. And one of the concerns my wife had in particular was these things are going to look so ugly on our walls. She was really hesitant, but you can look at them yourself and see, are they ugly? They actually didn't turn out to be too bad. And my wife, after they went up, said, you get used to them. They don't look bad at all. So that was one thing we were concerned about that didn't end up being anything. These are very quiet. As Larry mentioned earlier, they're much more comfortable at keeping a steady level of heating and cooling in the room. They're more energy efficient because when we go to bed at night, we'll just heat up the room that we're in and not necessarily the whole house, for example. And also every room has their own remote control. And so the person in that room can adjust the temperature to the temperature they like most. So it's more comfortable. I'd say only the one surprise is that, if we're only upstairs in the daytime and we're heating the upstairs, but not the downstairs, when we go downstairs, it's cold. We say, hey, it's sort of surprising to be cold, but then we remember, oh yeah, that's more energy efficient because we're not actually in that space and heating a room we don't need. Now, as I mentioned to you, there are many form factors for indoor air handlers. We use the wall mounted one in the upper left-hand corner, but there are other ways that you can circulate the air in your room, and your HVAC contractor could probably recommend the best versions. I will say that my 15-year-old house before had a central air conditioning system. And so I originally thought I would just replace the central with another central, which is what Larry showed us some pictures before. And the ducts but my contractor, when he looked at our ducting system, which was the crazy, really not very poorly done, even though it was only a 15-year-old house. He recommended we remove our ducts and remove our vents, which we did. So here you can see that we patched up the drywall, and I hate throwing anything away. So actually all the vents, I posted them on Facebook Marketplace and sold them for like $2 each. And in fact, I actually sold my whole existing HVAC system through Craigslist and so forth for a couple $100. I didn't end up throwing any of that into the landfill. It was only a 15-year-old system. Let me shift gears and talk about our hot water heater. We got this one on that shown on the left. Also the 80
And then Wei-Tai, just in terms of timing, it's about time to wrap up too.
Okay. We had another, we installed this heat pump 83-gallon unit from Sandon on the left. We chose not to go with a single unit shown on the right, mainly because it had CO2 as the refrigerant, and also it had a stainless steel tank. So that was one of the benefits there. Budget-wise, so the project in total cost $56,000. Half of it was from the mini split. We only got $500 in federal tax credits, but today, just 2 years later, you're going to hear about many, many thousands more in benefits that you can, financial benefits you can get. And so when we got rid of all our appliances, that actually enabled me to disconnect from the gas grid and call PG&E to take away my gas meter, and thereby running my house on a zero emission home today that's all powered by solar energy and clean energy from the grid. Cost-wise, it's been, last slide here, just been financially good for us over my first year of usage. You can see that compared to the previous 4 years in a mixed fuel house, the pricing of our electricity was about the same cost. And for some reason in the second year of it, it was even lower. So it has been also turned out to be good, as said to be very energy efficient. So in answer to must we burn fossil fuels in our home, I will say no. The answer was you don't have to do that. And the assumptions that I had were wrong. And I hope that the case study today is helpful in sharing some of the experiences that you can get out there and retrofit your home as well. So thanks for having me today.